Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Chrissy Hodges and I'm an advocate for OCD as well as a certified peer support specialist working around the world to support people who are living with OCD working toward recovery. I also can provide referrals to therapists or resources to help you along the way. I'm the author of Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. This talks about my journey in living with OCD and a few of the treatment aspects on what I went through to work toward recovery. So today I just wanted to do a quick video, just kind of a simple topic, but I get a lot of inquiries about this over email, just with specific questions or a little reassurance stuff too. But more along the lines of what it means to when your OCD changes themes. Oh, and I also wanted to let you know, NoCD is an app. NOCD, it's an app, but they also provide telehealth for individuals all across the world as well, doing exposure response prevention. So if you haven't checked them out, this might be a great option for you if you're looking for therapy. So that's treatmyocd.com. Okay, back to the topic at hand. So a lot of people have questions around, well, first of all, a lot of people have a lot of questions about whether or not they really have OCD or not. So this is a typical secondary fear. I know this is very reassurancy, but I don't care. A lot of times people live, maybe a short duration of time or a really long time dealing with lots of different themes or one particular theme. They may not know what the heck is going on. And then all of a sudden they may get really brave one day and type it into Google and find out, oh my gosh, maybe one of my video pops up or, intrusivethoughts.org or Phillipson's website or something. And then they go, holy crap, this is OCD. This isn't real. Even though it felt really real, it's, oh my goodness, this is a disorder. Well, that can feel really relieving because first of all, then you know that it's not you, that you didn't cause this and manifest it. But shortly after or even later, all of a sudden you can develop this fear of, but what if this isn't OCD and I'm the only one who has some of these symptoms, but I don't have all of them, and so this must mean, so this is where the comparing comes in, the Googling, and then you start looking for why you don't have OCD. First you're like, oh look, what is this? And then you're like, I need to find out I don't. So normal, so typical. It just encompasses the whole doubt of the actual disorder, right? So it's again, just digging into needing to know. I need to know 100% that I have OCD, and typically we're not going to find out 100%, right? I mean, I even got the diagnosis of OCD and then worried I was lying to Phillipson. I was like, I think I'm lying to you. And he was like, whatever, we're still going to treat you. So I wanted to explain that really quick and moving into this. So typically when people start Googling other people's their recovery stories and things like that, because there's a lot of people out there talking about their stories. My disclaimer is always, my story is not going to be like yours. Yours is not going to be like mine. We're not going to have, and the reason why is because we all have different backgrounds. We all have different reasons why this showed up, when it showed up, what factors are contributing to it. But we sometimes get stuck in the rut of, well, this person said this happened to them when they had sexual orientation OCD, and it didn't happen to me, so that must mean that I really don't have it. Be very, very careful when you're comparing your OCD story to people on the internet, including me. I'm very different than you. You're different from me. We're very similar in the fact that we have OCD, but your story is definitely not going to be like mine. I also want, just to put this little disclaimer in, I also want you to be really careful about following people and really putting a lot of stock into people who basically say, I have the cure, I'm cured, I no longer have OCD, I think that's great. And all we need to do is continue to strive every day to manage OCD to the point where we don't even notice it anymore. Okay, I am 100% for that. Stuart Ralph with the OCD Stories, we had this big conversation once about a cure for OCD. And we kind of came to this agreement of like, there is no cure right now, but we're all holding out hope that someday there's going to be a cure. And we just have to keep believing that, right? And one thing we can do is work really hard every day using the tools that work for us to get to a point where OCD isn't bothering us 24/7 or sometimes even for extended periods of time. But sometimes when you're following people or really listening to people who are just like, well, I'm cured. I never have an intrusive thought my whole life, blah, 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 blah. That is great. And I'm so happy for them. And whatever strategies they have to help you, that is awesome. But the flip side of that is that when people do experience OCD, then they look at that and go, I failed somewhere. I guess I'm not as good as this person, or I guess my OCD is worse, or what if I really don't have OCD? The flip side of the extremes, right? The extreme being like you can get to a point where you no longer have OCD and never have one bad thought in your life. Come on, y'all. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist for any human being walking on the face of this planet, so it cannot exist for OCD. This is not a Debbie Downer talk. This is a realistic talk. This is a be very careful who you are taking advice from and who you're taking suggestions when it's on the internet, okay? Because this is your recovery. And your recovery is not their recovery. And your recovery is not my recovery, and vice versa. So I hope my channel serves in a way that helps you see the realistic depiction, although you may not have symptoms of OCD and haven't had them for 5 years, and hallelujah, that is amazing for you. And I hope for all of us, we do get some relief, extended periods of time for relief, and that's what we are working towards every day. Just want to make sure that you understand that sometimes things can be, there's a flip side to everything, and it can be detrimental. So with that said, sometimes people look at things or read things on Google, which is why Google is good and bad. And all of a sudden they start comparing their OCD story to it. So you might hear from, like for me, let's take me for instance, I had the fear vomiting and then I had sexual orientation OCD. It was basically those two major themes. Sexual orientation probably being the bigger one when I was in my teenage years, although the vomit one is always there. And I hate it. But I consider myself to have had one major theme going into therapy, and then therapy was very successful for sexual orientation OCD. And then I kind of moved on, and it wasn't until later in life that I developed other themes or OCD came back, and then I learned how to utilize the tools of ERP in order to move past those things too. But sometimes people will write me and they'll say, oh my goodness, well, I have all kinds of themes. I have multiple themes. I have all these themes. That must mean I really don't have OCD. So again, here we're going with the black and white thinking. If I don't have this, that must mean I don't have OCD. It always kind of funnels down into I need to figure out if this is 100% OCD. Remembering, my story isn't yours, your story isn't mine. Sometimes people might have multiple themes. And it changes every single day. Sometimes it's changing by the hour. That isn't any less OCD than a person that's had the same theme for 20 years. But it's really easy to look at someone, especially if they've gotten better through therapy, to go, well, I don't have what they had, so I might not get better as well. Remembering that each person is different, and each journey to recovery is going to look a lot different. So what I also really I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way, but what I wanted to talk about is the changing of the themes. So a lot of people also ask, well, if I get therapy for, I don't know, the fear of pedophilia, right? And it's successful, is it going to come back at some point? Or there's two questions. Is it going to come back at some point? Because usually what we want is, I never want to have this theme again. I never want to have these thoughts again. And that's kind of a feeling of desperation, right? I'm suffering. I want to get better. I never want to experience this again. So that question is typically coming out of desperation. Please tell me I'll never have this again. The second part is, what is the second part? Will I get other themes? So if I get this theme, the POCD, under control, at some point, is it likely that I'm going to have a different theme if OCD returns? Well, first of all, I don't have concrete answers to those questions. Again, because everyone is different, everything is different, you may learn to manage POCD so rigid and on point that the moment a thought comes in your head 20 years later, you're like, boom, there it is, ERP, let's go. And it never gives you that same experience that you had before. While others may not have it for 20 years, and then it comes back and it takes you a few days or it takes you a week or so to go, that's right, I got through this once, I can do it again, which is where peer support can be really valuable. And I also can't answer whether or not your themes are going to change. Maybe you don't have another theme ever, or maybe sorry, dog's barking. Maybe that does come back for you in 20 years or 2 years or 5 years, or just cyclical. Every year at some point it comes back, you use what worked before, you work through it, there you go, it's done. So I can't really answer that, but I can use my own experience. And I can tell you a few things that might help you if this does happen. People ask me if I still have sexual orientation theme. Yes, it still comes back. So that can feel disappointing to hear, right? Because what you want to know is, I'm going to get treatment, I'm never going to have it again, I'm never going to suffer. Okay, so back up. It does come back for me, but I don't suffer under it the way that I did before treatment. Why? Because I got effective treatment. I learned the tools that helped me to know what to do when it shows up. Now, the hardest part for me about recovery when themes show up or when themes change is believing it's OCD. I think I've said this in another video. Why? Because OCD feels so real. It feels so real. I could easily label it as OCD, and then I could go, oh, but what if it isn't this time? That's going back to what I originally started this video talking about. Oh my goodness, I have some relief, but what if it isn't OCD? And then these thoughts are real, or I'm going crazy, or whatever else your brain is telling you, right? So that's the hardest part of my recovery. The hardest part is recognizing and believing it, and then taking the steps, the action to go, okay, I'm going to use my tools around this, because I'm scared. I'm scared to find out that it's not OCD and that this is real, which then could trickle down and go, what if it was never OCD? That's a common fear. I'm sharing that with you because I want you to know if you think that way, it's really common. Eventually, I kick my own ass and I go, let's go. And I do it. But that just tends to be my pattern, and I'm okay with that, right? I don't suffer for very long, but I'm able to recognize. Now, when it comes to sexual orientation OCD, I usually know pretty much right away. There's always this jolt of fear that takes me back to when I was like 14, and like sitting in my room, tormented. I can almost identify with that girl again. But then I just go, okay, yeah, this feels way too familiar. I get it now. I really don't often go down the path of, is this OCD or not? Just because hell, it's been 35 years at this point that I've had OCD, even longer, I think. So I'm pretty used to those older themes and understanding when they pop up. Now, lastly, I just want to share when a new theme comes that is different than what you're used to. So as awful as it sounds, I'm so used to sexual intrusive thoughts and violent intrusive thoughts. So those obscure thoughts that come with the physical sensation. So the groinal urges, things like that. I'm so used to having those that it did get to a point where I'd be like, oh, I'm going to pick up a knife and stab my dog. And I might get a little anxiety, but I would be like, yeah, well, I just had an urge. I know that's OCD, right? Because I've had so much practice doing it. It's when OCD kind of shape shifts into something else that was really, really hard for me. So it's almost like the groinal became reassurance. When I would get the groinal, even though I hated it and it was a jolt of anxiety, I could go, okay, that's typically something that's associated with OCD. When that wasn't there and I was having new physical symptoms or sensations, that's when things got really hard. That's when it felt like it wasn't believable for me for it to be OCD. So in learning that lesson the hard way of living with specific themes, real event stuff for however long, I learned to recognize compulsions. So this is my go-to strategy on how to recognize it's OCD. Even if I don't believe it because it feels so real, I look for the compulsions. The compulsions for me are always the same. It's always rumination, it's always avoidance, it's always mental reviewing, it's always scanning my body, so checking, what's going on, where's this pain, what's this, what does this mean? And I tend to get very sad and down, right? This is never going to go away. Life is never going to be better. I'm jealous of other people. So, and those emotions are super extreme to me. They're not like your normal sadness. I feel sad today, or the Titanic made me sad when I watched it on AMC the other night. You know, it's not that kind of sadness. It's this impending doom sadness. So I have to look for those things, and when I'm doing them, again, it sometimes feels so real, and I go, oh God, it can't be that. And then I go, oh my gosh, it is that, and I am doing these things. And then sometimes I feel sad and disappointed in like a normal, healthy way. And I think to myself, gosh, I sure wish I didn't have this stupid fucking disorder. And I wish I could be a normal person. Someday I might move through that, right? Someday it might just be like, jump right to, let's do ERP or whatever. But I think that I still sometimes grieve having this, and I think that's okay for me. Again, I don't compare myself to other people. I don't look bad at myself for the fact that I do grieve having this sometimes. And it does feel very unfair. So that is part of how I live successfully with OCD. And I guess the message I want to leave you with is, you're going to have all kinds of shape shifting and all kinds of stuff happening with OCD as you're working towards treatment, during and after. Life with OCD is different for everybody. I don't want to optimistically say like get creative with it, but you can be creative with how you manage it. Trying out different measures of exposure response prevention, trying out different ways of combating avoidance. You're allowed to do those things, right? Because the whole point of managing OCD is to not let it stop you from living your life. So in whatever way you have to get back out and push through it and live life, you can do this despite having OCD. You can do it with OCD and with OCD symptoms. I had a client say to me, I think it was yesterday, something like, I can't just stop living life waiting for something to happen so I can go do this. And I thought that was so important. We get very wrapped up in, well, if only this theme was gone, or if only I didn't feel this bad, then life can begin. No, life is happening now, and you can do life with or without OCD symptoms. So I hope that helps, and I hope that this video made sense. It was a little all over the place, but wanted to make sure to touch some of the more important things. And I hope you have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next time. If you need peer support, referral consultations, head on over to ChrissyHodges.com, and we can get you on my calendar. Have a great weekend.